course set. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into what is National Board Renewal. Some expectations, just some things that we're going to be covering. You probably have a lot of different ideas about why you're here today and what you're expecting to learn. Hopefully, these essential questions cover those things. So we'll talk about what's going to be required of you as a renewal candidate. We'll talk about ways that the architecture of accomplished teaching can connect with your work as a professional. One of the things with going through the renewal process is it's relearning everything that National Board values. We probably do it, but we just are not sure of the names for it anymore. So we'll talk about things like the architecture of accomplished teaching and the core propositions. And when we start going through that, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I remember that. I'm doing that. I just didn't remember all the words for it. So it's learning that language, again, of what National Board is. And then we're going to talk about ways that you can connect your professional growth experiences to student learning, because that's what's really important here. Just as we had the child, the student at the center of everything we did as an initial candidate, it's just as important that the student is there as a renewal candidate. Everything that we talk about has to somehow relate back to student learning, student achievement, student growth. And it can be directly or indirectly. There are some things that you may do now as you're farther in your career, some opportunities that may be available to you at this point that allow you to indirectly impact student growth and learning. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, real quickly, the current legislation is a little bit confusing. Everything with National Board, as you know, is always up for grabs. It's annual legislation in terms of our initial candidates right now. If you're talking to an initial candidate, let them know that right now the supplement is at the $5,000 level. It's not the same for you. We'll talk about what it is for you, but I just want you to have this information. For new candidates, they're looking at the supplement at the $5,000 level for no more than the 10 years of their certificate. For you, right now, our legislation is in statute, which means that it's permanent legislation, gives us a little bit more protection, and hopefully it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for the General Assembly to make any kinds of changes if they chose to do so. The way the legislation is interpreted at this moment and for this period of time is that if you made your initial application to National Board, that means the first time that you applied and subsequently achieved certification, probably way back 2003, 2004 for all of us. If you were in before July 1, 2010, you have the opportunity to renew and continue to receive the supplement at the $7,500 level for no more than one additional 10-year period. So if you were in your current MBCT right now, eligible for renewal, you are fine. You have that opportunity to go through this process, and you will continue to receive your supplement at the $7,500 level from the state district. You're going to have to talk to your district people about it, but $7,500 from the state for no more than this one additional 10-year period. And that's all really just determined by the position that you have within your district. You may be eligible for it, but if your position is not eligible because you've moved into administration, then you won't get the supplement. It would have been the same if you were in your first 10-year cycle. For example, my position, I do not have enough direct experience with students, so I am not able to collect the supplement. I don't get that money. Okay, but it was important for me to go through this process and continue to be an MBCT. Okay. Participants are still muted. We'll keep participants muted until the end, when maybe we'll unmute certain people if you want to talk. So you should just be able to hear me at this point. Okay? Let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk a little bit about the basis for renewal. The expectation is that as an MBCT, you have continued to use those core propositions and the architecture of accomplished teaching as really the foundation for everything that you do in your classroom, for yourself as a lifelong learner, and that you've continued to grow, you've continued to learn more so that you could enhance student learning. The core propositions should be embedded in the teaching practice of all MBCTs. The core propositions are the foundation of the National Board standards. And I would encourage you, when you're going through this process, to go ahead and download from the National Board website the current standards for your certificate. You may have your ones from when you went through it 8-9 years ago, but you're going to want to look at the updated ones. Most of the standards have been updated in the time since we actually went through the process, but it's not a huge change, but look at those anyway. The architecture of accomplished teaching defines the cyclical practice of accomplished teachers. It's that plan, do, review cycle that really has become a part of who we are as teachers. And we're going to take those 5 core propositions and that architecture apart in just a minute. But I want to give you sort of an overview. The way I'm going to work through this is I'm going to give you the big picture of renewal, and then I'm just going to continue to keep breaking it down into smaller bits and pieces so that you can understand everything that's going to happen. When you go through renewal, renewal focuses on the professional growth of the National Board Certified Teacher. It's the growth that you have experienced over the last 8 or 9 years and its connection to student learning. So the instrument that we use through renewal helps you to document that professional growth. You're going to submit evidence that links that growth back to student learning. Now, the one thing that's different, I'm going to talk to you a lot about what's different between renewal and initial candidacy. As an initial candidate, there wasn't a lot of flexibility. There wasn't a lot of choice. It was kind of do it this way. You're going to be very surprised because renewal is not that way. There is more flexibility. There is more choice. But one of the things that is different is that as an initial candidate, you had to prove that you were an accomplished teacher. In the renewal process, you're not having to do that. National Board assumes that you are still at that level. You are still doing everything that you need to do to be an accomplished teacher. What they're looking at is, have you continued to grow, or did you get that certification and sit back and say, okay, I'm done for 8 or 9 years. I'm not going to worry about it. So they're looking at your growth. Renewal is available to all MBCT. So even if the supplement wasn't there, we could all go through the process. The state can't stop us from doing that. The General Assembly could never stop us from going through that process. They could, you know, at some point say to teachers or MBCTs that they weren't going to get the supplement, but they couldn't stop us from going through the process. It's available to classroom teachers, to administrators, and retirees. Those retirees still have to have a valid state teaching license in order to go through the process. As long as you've got that license, you can renew. If you're no longer in the classroom, for example, like I was out of the classroom last year, or you've changed your subject or your developmental level, you can borrow a class for your video-based entries. And that's what I had to do. I had to go back and borrow a classroom to be able to do some teaching so that I could showcase that in my video. And we'll take those videos apart, like I said, in just a minute. Uh-oh, clicked one too many, sorry. All right, so renewal considerations. You have to renew in the same certificate area as you originally certified. So I was an early childhood generalist. I have to renew as an early childhood generalist. If you have changed positions, that's when you're going to need to borrow a class to be able to conduct your work with that same age, same area, certificate area student. It's available in year 8 or year 9. We really encourage MBCTs to go through the process in year 8. And the reason for that is because if your National Board certificate expires, you have to complete the entire National Board process again as an initial candidate. So if you go through it in year 8, and you do not recertify, you still have year 9 to try it. If you wait and you start in year 9 and you don't recertify, then your certificate is going to expire and you'll have to start the process all over again. So we don't want that to happen. Most MBCTs that go through this process are going to renew. It's a higher percentage of candidates who will renew the first time going through the process, but you still just want to make sure that, that you have that opportunity. Now, the other thing that's going to happen, if you've waited until year 9 to apply and go through the process, you are going to see a lapse in your supplement. And I just want to go ahead and tell you that right now so that you're not surprised when it happens. Go ahead and start planning for it. You will remember that when you certified, for the first time as an MBCT, the state back paid us to the beginning of the fiscal year. So we got that big check, or your district put larger amounts in each monthly paycheck for you to make up for that time from when we got our scores back to July 1. Because of that, when you get to June 30th, if you're a Year 9 person, when you get to June 30th, your supplement is going to stop. Okay? It will start up again as soon as you achieve renewal. And that's only for people who are in Year 9 when they go through the process. If you are a Year 8 person, it won't impact you at all. But it's just those Year 9 people, and I always get a lot of questions about that. Your renewal is going to last for 10 years. And they don't take away a year just because you do it in Year 8. They're going to tack it on at the end, so you're still getting 20 full years of certification out of this. Okay? So again, it's just making sure you're renewing in that same area. Start it in Year 8 if at all possible. It's going to last those 10 years, and don't let that certification expire. We don't want you to have to start all over again. Okay, so here's the timeline. We already mentioned that renewal is required prior to the expiration of your current certificate. You've got those two opportunities. And you can apply September through December. So I am assuming that most of you have already applied. You're already in. You got that everything sent off to National Board, and you're just looking for some information about what it is that you're going to write up and what you're going to do. You have to have your renewal entry submitted postmarked by April 30th. You will get your results in October. So we have longer to get our information in, and we get our results back sooner than our initial candidates. Okay? So April 30th is the reason why, is the date when you're going to submit everything. Here's what we call the color of your MBCT future, and this helps us figure out what year you're in. So right now, let's say that you got in September 1, 2012 through January 31st, 2013. If you were a 2003 MBCT, you're in your your first attempt. I'm skipping us ahead a year. If you were certified in 2002, you're in your second attempt. Okay? So 2002 MBCTs, this is Year 8 for you. 2003 MBCTs, backwards again, Year 9 for you. 2003 MBCTs, Year 8 for you. Okay, and you can get a complete calendar at this link right here. So I'll say that one more time just because I kept messing it up. 2002 MBCTs are in Year 9. It's your second opportunity. 2003 MBCTs, it is Year 8 for you, and you are in your 8th year, so it's your first opportunity. All right, I mentioned those National Board core propositions. Those are the ideals that guide all National Board standards, all assessments. It's the backbone of what is National Board certification. Accomplished teachers are expected to model exceptional knowledge, skills, dispositions, and beliefs. And all of this, I bet, is coming back to you. Let's look at what the core propositions are. And I always tell initial candidates that MBCTs may not be able to quote these word for word, but they know what they are because it really has become a part of who we are as teachers. These 5 core propositions are infused into every certificate area. They are recursive in the standards. They're embedded in the prompts for portfolio exercises. There isn't one template, as you know, for what each of these core propositions look like in practice. They're just kind of guiding principles that help us to be that accomplished teacher. The first one is that teachers are committed to students in their learning. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach those subjects to students. So remember, it's not just our content knowledge, it's our pedagogy that's important as well. And you can choose, maybe there was an area of professional growth for you that's not content. Maybe it's more how you present information to students or the way that you present information. That would fit under the second core proposition. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. Teachers think systematically about their practice and learn from experience. I know you're all still reflecting on everything that you do and making sure that you learn from what happens in your classroom. And then the fact that teachers are members of learning communities, so not necessarily a professional learning community, but you're part of that learning community that consists of parents and families, the community, and other professionals. Remember, your work as a leader, a learner, and a collaborator. Here's that architecture of accomplished teaching that I mentioned. Okay, we read it from the bottom up because each piece builds on the piece before it. It demonstrates the connection between the core propositions, the standards, and what is accomplished teaching. So if we start down here at the bottom, you notice that the core propositions are color-coded as we go up the helix through the architecture of accomplished teaching. We start off thinking about our students. Who are they? What do they know? What do they like? How do they learn? All of these things. We start with a very solid foundation of our subject area standards and our knowledge of student standards. Knowledge of student standards is the one standard that's consistent across all certificates. We all have one that is somehow related to knowledge of student. There are 4 dimensions to the knowledge of student standard. Knowledge has to be accessible to all learners. We have to have knowledge of how students at that age, the particular age that we're working with, develop and learn. We have to have respect and consideration for individual cultural, linguistic, and family differences. And we have to have knowledge of student self-concept, motivation, relationship with peers, and other adults. So once we take all of that into consideration, we begin setting those high worthwhile goals that are appropriate at that particular time for those particular kids at in that particular setting. The goals have to be measurable and evidence-based, so we never write goals for an activity. We always write goals for a learning outcome. Then we begin to implement instruction designed to attain those goals, and this is where you plan your instructional sequence and you select the teaching strategies that are appropriate to get the information across. Think about core proposition number 2, knowing our subjects and how to teach it to those students. Then we evaluate, and you want to look at group performance and individual performance. You want to make the connection between your instructional goals and your evaluation of student learning. You want to think about your subgroups here. Did it work for one particular group of students but not another? Then we reflect, and we reflect on everything from the instructional design to the way that we presented the information to how the students responded. Everything comes in here. Issues, concerned, what worked, what didn't, what would we do differently? And then we set those new high worthwhile goals. That's the architecture, and we just keep going through it over and over and over again. That's the plan, do, review process. So now you're kind of caught up on where we are with National Board. Hopefully that's a good reminder of everything that you did as an initial candidate. As a renewal candidate, you're going to complete what's called a Profile of Professional Growth, or a PPG, and I'll refer to it a lot of times as a PPG. The renewal instrument is that PPG, and there are 4 components to the profile. The first requires the teacher to document professional growth experiences. Professional growth experiences are those that have evolved, are varied, and or multifaceted. Pay attention to that, and or. They don't have to be both, they can be. Varied and or multifaceted and have been a focus over an extended period of time. 2 other components document the impact of the 2 different professional growth experiences on learning. One must focus on student learning and requires a video as well as written commentary. The second could focus on a student or adult learning and requires a written commentary in either a video or sample of student work. The final component is a reflection piece where the teacher has the opportunity to describe your work and how it's impacted student learning and reflect on future plans. So there are 4 pieces to that profile of professional growth. When we think about something being multifaceted, there are different elements from certificate-specific content, professional development, trends, issues. Could be issues with equity and diversity, for example. Something that's varied means different activities. It could be interaction with colleagues, professional groups, parents. So they're very almost similar. It's kind of tricky sometimes to figure out what the difference is, but look at that. Think about what's the difference between varied and multifaceted. Okay, let's break it down a little bit more because I just gave you the big picture. You've got 3 components and 1 reflection. Here's where choice comes in. Within those 3 components, you can do 2 videos, or you can do 1 video and submit student work samples. It's totally up to you. I chose to do 2 videos, but that's because that's just what worked for me. You have to make sure that you're demonstrating the connection to student learning. So in my video, if I talked about how I went through some different trainings, I should be able to showcase in that video how that training has impacted me as a teacher and is now impacting what my students are doing in the classroom. Okay? Here is a visual for those of us that are visual learners. We start off with component 1. And in component 1, you are going to describe 4 PGEs. The whole big thing that we're doing through Renewal is that profile of professional growth, the PPG. Inside the components, we have PGs, professional growth experiences. So you're going to describe 4 of them, 4 topics, 4 areas where you have really focused your work. And I'll tell you how I went about picking my 4 in just a minute. After you describe those 4 PGEs as part of or during component 1, you're going to select 1 PGE to describe in greater detail in component 2. You'll do the video, you'll do the written commentary about it, you'll just talk a little bit more about it. So you're going to pick those ones that you already kind of gave the overview of, and just dive into it a little bit deeper. In component 3, you're going to pick another one of those PGEs that you already described in component 1. Don't create a new one. And you're either going to submit a video or student work entries to support what you're saying, that it has impacted student learning. And then you're going to do your reflection. All of this is scored holistically, which means when you get your score from National Board, it's either going to say renewed or not renewed. You don't have that opportunity to bank entries like you may have done as an initial candidate. So it's all scored holistically. The nice thing about this is that when we went through initial candidacy, we had to be careful to keep saying things over and over again. You had to describe your instructional context over and over again. You had to help that person to really see your classroom over and over again, because every entry was going to be scored by a different person. You don't have to do that with Renewal. Once you've said it once, you are good to go. You don't need to say it again. That same person is scoring all 4 pieces. So that helps you to be able to get your information across quicker. And you actually have fewer pages that you have to write, so that's one reason why that's important. All right, let me tell you kind of how I went about picking my 4 PGEs, and I'll tell you what they were. The way that worked best for me was to think about it sort of like an umbrella. And I wanted to categorize all the different things that I had been doing into 4 areas, or to pick the 4 areas where I felt like I had done the most work. So I started off with just a stack of note cards, and I went through everything that I felt like I had been involved in over the last 8 years, all the professional development, the books that I'd read, the classes I'd taken, grants that I'd written, activities I'd been involved in. I just sat there and wrote it all down. And I'll tell you, that's really a very powerful exercise, because it's not very often that we as teachers get to go, you know what, I've done some pretty good things. So that helped me to realize that, hey, I have been working over these last 8 years, and I have become a better teacher and a stronger educator over that time. So I wrote them all down, and then I took my stack of note cards to all my friends there at school, and I asked them to think through with me. What else have we been doing? What else have I been involved in? And they were able to remember a couple things that I had forgotten. So I jotted those down. Then I brought those note cards home, and I started sorting them. Well, this has to do with science, or this has to do with this, or these all go together. and I ended up with these piles. What I did once I finished going through all those note cards is I looked at my piles and I picked my 4 strongest areas. For me, they were mentoring, mentoring new teachers, mentoring students from the college that were coming over, mentoring students. I had one of my PGEs is just mentoring. The second PGE, I had a lot of note cards in this area, was science. That was an area of focus for me. My third one was technology, and I'm going to come back to that one. And my fourth one was something I called All Students Can Learn. And underneath there, I had information about brain-based research, because I've done a lot of work with looking at what does brain-based research tell us and how can we use that in our classrooms. And also arts integration, because our school had changed to an arts magnet school during the time that I was an MBCT. You have to, somewhere through this process, embed technology. So it either needs to be a part of every single PGE that you write about, or you can do one whole PGE on technology, which is what I chose to do. I felt like that was easier, and I was sure to get the information across that way. Don't be scared off by technology. You don't have to be, the super guru with everything that's going on. Think about how much has changed with technology since we were certified. Most of us probably did not have websites. We weren't keeping that up to date. We weren't emailing our newsletters and providing information to parents that way. You may be blogging or podcasting. You may use a smart board. I mean, we were barely at overheads. I mean, we were still kind of there. So if you're using a smart board or Promethean board, even just, I just lost that, like an Elmo, lost the name of it there for a second. If you're using that, if you're using digital cameras, if you're using cell phones in your classroom, if you're having your students text in answers to, there's programs out there that will allow them to do that. All of that that's all technology, it's all changes. So there's a lot that you're doing that you're probably just not even thinking about, that's all come about since you were certified. All right, so those were my 4 areas, and they were a collection of several things under one umbrella. They can be uneven. There's no way that those 4 PGEs are going to be, all the same. They're all going to be the same strength the whole way across. I felt like I was much stronger in the areas of mentoring and All Students Can Learn. Science was a little bit weaker, but it was still an area of focus for me over an extended period of time, so I was able to include that. National Board expects that. There's no way you can be perfect and the expert in everything that you do, so there's always going to be room for growth. You have to be prepared to show that growth and that impact over time, that it's not something that has just become a focus for you right now because you're going through National Board Renewal. Now, there are things that you may be doing right now, but they should be added on to things that have started maybe a little ways back. Okay? All right, let's take those components apart a little bit more. As I mentioned, Component 1 has those 4 professional growth experiences. So for me, I talked holistically about mentoring, science, technology, and All Students Can Learn. You will write 3 pages of commentary for each one of those PGEs. So you're just kind of summarizing it. 2 pages of samples of products for each PGE. And it can be, basically anything. It can be emails. If you presented at a conference and you have the agenda, that will work. If you went to a workshop and you got a certificate, you can just copy the certificate and send that. The assessors for renewal are taking a very cursory glance at what you submit for products. All they're looking to do is to kind of prove that, oops, she said or he said that they did this. Here's proof of that. And you can't prove everything because you only get 2 pages. So they're really giving you the benefit of the doubt that, yes, you did what you said you did. They're just checking on a couple things. So don't spend lots of time creating or trying to find samples of products for your PGEs. Remember that those PGEs have to demonstrate current content knowledge and pedagogy. Think based on your certificate, use of technology, ongoing varied and or multifaceted experiences and relate everything back to the impact on student learning. All right, let me break mine down for you just a little bit more. Okay, just as an example. And again, this is not the right answer. It's just an example. Under mentoring, there were a lot of different things that I did. I started off serving as a mentor because I went through a district-level training, and I was mentoring a brand new teacher. The next year, the state required a different training. So I went and I became state trained, state certified as a mentor. And I served as a mentor to another first-year teacher. Once I did that a little bit and I came to Sarah, then I became trained as a trainer to be able to offer these state trainings. And I started training mentors. And at the same point in time, I'm mentoring mentors and I'm mentoring beginning teachers. We had a grant where we partnered with Winthrop, and I started getting some additional mentor training through the New Teacher Center in Santa Cruz, California. I went through all of that, brought that back, still continued to mentor beginning teachers, became a trainer for that, and I'm now offering that training in different districts across the state. Now, under mentoring, I also talked about how I mentored education students, how I had those pre-service teachers in my classroom, and I used the mentoring skills with those students as well. Now, this impacts directly and indirectly the students in my room. If I'm working with an education student who is in my classroom, he or she is directly impacting my students. So my role there is important. Now, as a mentor trainer or as a mentor, I am indirectly impacting students because I'm helping these beginning teachers to develop their skills, their knowledge, and their pedagogy. Okay, so it's an indirect impact there. All right, in terms of technology, I did my blog, I did my website, and the fact that it was interactive and that I posted things on there where the parents could respond to me or students could do things and submit activities like a little science experiment that they had done with their parents. They could bring it back in and share with the class. Smartboard training, I used that. I just submitted my certificate saying, look, I've been through Smartboard training. Podcasts, had done a number of podcasts. I was using flip cameras in my classroom, so I talked about that. I used e-newsletters, and so that was a way to share information with my parents. So that's sort of some of those ideas that fit under the big umbrellas for my PGEs. All right, in Component 2, this is the application of one of those PGEs in your classroom. It shows you are using what you have learned. You're going to do a 10-minute video of classroom instruction. Has to be the same content area as your original certificate, same developmental level as your original certificate. And then you'll do 4 pages. Remember, we used to have to write 4 pages of written commentary, so much less writing going through the renewal process. And by the way, no assessment center if you haven't figured that out yet. So that's gone. We don't even have to worry about that. You have to demonstrate student learning in an environment that ensures equity of access, it promotes an appreciation for diversity, and demonstrates your certificate-specific content knowledge. That should sound a little bit like some of those knowledge of student standards I went over when we did the Helix and the Architecture of Accomplished Teaching. Your videos are supposed to be date stamped, and you can submit a DVD this go around. It doesn't have to be a VHS tape. If you cannot get your video camera to date stamp your work, you can have an administrator sign off on it for you. But it has to be from this current cycle. So you can't have a video that you did last year. Okay, you have to be identifiable in at least one of the segments, because one of the things that happens here in Component 2 is that you can actually cut your video into 3 segments. Remember before, unedited, it had to be continuous. Well, now you can pick 3 different segments of a lesson. It can be 3 different lessons that you want to put together to show how the learning that you've been engaged in is impacting your students. The same rules about protecting the anonymity of your students apply. So just first names or the boy in the front row with the blue shirt, those kinds of things. Here's my example, and again, not the right answer, not the perfect way, just the way that I did it. I chose All Students Can Learn, and that was the PGE that I focused on for Component 2. So I talked about all of the training that I had received as our school became an arts magnet school, because it happened literally overnight. None of us were trained in arts integration. So we went through some extensive, exhaustive training. From there, I started presenting. I've been asked to do a number of workshops on arts integration strategies, and so I had that piece as well. But in terms of what I did for my video, I borrowed a class, went back, 2nd grade, same area, same grade as what I was in before, and I taught an arts integration math lesson to the students. In my lesson, we're doing something with stretchy bands, and they're actually building shapes. It's a dance lesson. They're building shapes and creating three-dimensional shapes, doing a good bit of problem solving to develop those shapes. I chose to use just that lesson. I actually recorded 3 different lessons, but I took everything from that one lesson. I did have 3 different segments. I had me kind of introducing, because when I do the video, I actually am at a different school, not my home school, and it's a STEM school, and these students have not been exposed to arts integration. They don't know dance concepts as well as my students back at my home school would have. So I'm doing the introduction. I have some of the work where they are doing the problem solving, and then I have some video at the end where they're putting their whole dance together with their shapes. Okay, that's what I chose to do. And then I've got those 4 pages of written commentary explaining what's happening, how I learned this year, and I'm applying it in the classroom, that I can still do that. Okay, that's component 2. Component 3 is the application of a different PGE. So you go back to component 1 and you pick another one. I mean, I would pick your 2 strongest, whatever ones they happen to be. I chose mentoring for this one. And here you can either do a 6-minute video, and it can be in sections again, or 8 pages of learner work, 4 pages of written commentary. For this one, because National Board knows that MBCTs in year 8 and year 9 are not always just in the classroom. They're not always there in a classroom at all times, that they're doing things outside the classroom. You may be a coach, you may be an instructional coach, you may be presenting professional development. So they want to give you this opportunity. If you are in that classroom, that is strong evidence. That's fine. You are welcome to do this with your student learners. There's nothing wrong with that. I chose to work with adult learners in my video, and it's actually a tape of me presenting a mentor training. And there are 2 sections. I did 2 different sections, one where I'm presenting information, the second section where I'm facilitating a group activity. So that's what I did. And it's tying back what I learned, all those trainings that I went through, and how I am indirectly impacting students in classrooms, because I'm training mentors now and getting them to go back and support beginning teachers who are working with those students. So it's a little bit farther out. That link is a little bit farther out, but it still worked for me. The last part is reflection, and it's just 3 pages of written commentary. So it's much, much less. We started with component 1 with a total of 12 pages, and then we have 4 pages for component 2, 4 pages for component 3, and 3 pages for the reflection. So a lot less writing. This is the analysis of the relationship between your practice and student learning. It's what you see in your work. You're looking for patterns. You're looking for trends. You're looking for themes. You want to really start to hone in and see, gosh, I do a lot in this area. I'm not doing as much over here. You're going to be expected to talk about some of the challenges. For me, with the technology piece, as I was leaving the classroom, that's when the budget cuts were starting, and we were losing some of those technology pieces. We just didn't have it available anymore. That was an area of challenge for me. Being outside of the classroom itself created a challenge, so I had to talk about that. None of this should just be easy. You just kind of cruised on through and didn't have any problems. Talk about why it was hard at times to continue this growth. You want to keep, as always, tying it back to that impact on student learning. They're looking for you not to be able to quote National Board standards, but to see evidence of National Board standards in practice. So they're really looking for you to be aware still of those National Board standards and to understand knowledge of student, for example, or understand what it's like to work with parents. those kinds of things. You'll be asked to describe where you're going next. So we don't get to stop just because we're going through renewal. We have to say, well, gosh, here's my area of focus for the next a couple of years, or here's something I think I need to work on for the next couple of years. But remember, don't make it sound like it was just really, really easy and you cruised on through this. You've got to be able to discuss some of those challenges. I think I skipped a page here. Let's see what happened. Okay, steps to renewal. As I mentioned, list those professional growth experiences. I chose to do them on note cards. Do them however you want. Analyze those experiences related to the core propositions. You want to make sure those 5 core propositions are coming through in your PGEs. So somewhere in all of those PGEs, you want to address all 5 core propositions. Think about it in terms of the architecture of accomplished teaching, and then look for patterns and connections between the different activities to kind of come up with your big idea. What is your big professional growth experience? I mentioned to you that it's holistic scoring, that all the pieces are read together. We talked about the fact that individual scores are not going to be banked, and that you get a response of either renewed or not renewed. Your entries are going to be scored by MBCTs. It's all scored as a unit, and if the scorers don't agree, there'll be 2 people that are going to score. Then there's going to be a third read. So let's say one of us says renewed, one of us says not renewed, then that third read is always going to be a trainer or a supervisor. And so you'll have that person. 25% of you will have a random third read anyway. And then all of your assessors are going to go through 2 days of training before they begin scoring any entries. The renewed level of the rubric, you know how National Board works with rubrics, so take some time to study that. You have to provide sufficient evidence of professional growth. Here are all those terms again: that has evolved, is varied and or multifaceted, and has been a focus over an extended period of time. Let me talk a little bit about that focus. Like I said, you can have things that you just started. For example, under mentoring, I was just getting certified to train some of the new teacher-centered trainings. And I had just started working with cognitive coaching. That had happened within the year prior to me starting the renewal process. But I had all these other mentoring experiences that came before, and it was kind of a building. I was building up that wall. I did this, and then I was able to do this. So it's okay if some things are just now starting and you talk about how that's going to continue. I talked about the fact that I'm going to continue on. I've still got probably 2 years of work with cognitive coaching before I can become a trainer for that. So that's a focus for me. But I started it as I was going through this renewal process. But there has to be enough before it so that they know that you're not just doing it because you're going through renewal. Couple other considerations. That application, of course, you already did this, available online. $11.50 is the total cost to renew. $300 of that was the non-refundable application fee. And you can withdraw. If something happens and you need to withdraw, you can get $850 back, but you have to submit written notification to National Board prior to the portfolio, the profile due date. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then if you need more information, you are very comfortable with the National Board website, I'm sure. There's that 1-800-22-TEACH number. And most of the time you're going to get Sandy. She's going to cover South Carolina, and she's going to be really sweet to you and answer your questions. If you have specific questions about, let's say, an entry or the directions for one of your components, you want to submit that through your My Profile on the National Board website. You should have a My Inbox, and you can actually post the question in there, and they'll respond to you within a couple days. As we get closer to deadlines, they'll respond within 10 to 12 hours. Now, they may say, on page 22, it says, and quote it back to you, but that's fine. I always tell candidates, you're paying them a lot of money to look at your work so they can answer your questions. So if you're not sure and you just want to hear them say on page 22, then ask the question. Remember to keep a copy of any correspondence that you have from National Board. If you talk to somebody, write it down, make sure you get their name, put down the date, and keep all that. So that if it ever becomes a question, you have that information. You've got the SARA website address here. You can find information there about the legislation. There's our 1-800 number, and then my email address and Katie Gibson's email address. Katie will be glad to answer any questions about, I can't find it on the National Board website, or how do I apply, those kinds of things. She's not going to talk to you about your entries because she's not a teacher. She hasn't been through the initial process and obviously not through the renewal process. But she can help put you in touch with me if you have any questions, and she's got a great bit of information in her head as well about National Board. The one other thing that I just want to mention to you is that I am blogging, and I am putting some information on there about renewal, just kind of random things that come to me, or if I talk to a number of candidates and I'm hearing some similar questions. You can follow my blog. It's National Board, just nbsupport.blogspot.com. And there'll be information even on there for initial candidates that might be of interest to you. There might also be information that you can help to share with other teachers who might be interested in going through this process. It's going to be really important that we're getting the right information out there, so I want to make sure that you're informed about what the legislation says and what's available to teachers who are just starting this process as well. Okay, that was me talking and giving a lot of information very, very quickly. So what questions do you have at this point? That was good. Question mark popped up right away. Let me go back to my color of MBCT. This person's asking about when they can apply. If our National Board started in November 2004, so you weren't actually on that chart, it's correct that we will need to apply between September 1st, 2012 and January 31st, 2013, and that your portfolio, your PGE, would be due on April 30th, 2013. That's correct. That's correct, and that would be year 8 for you. You're welcome. It's confusing, I know. I always have to have that color of your MBCT future in front of me or I can't figure it out. And I still get it messed up as I did through this webinar. What else can I answer for you? Here's the other thing. You know, when we went through initial, we were looking at hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of writing. I, in all honesty, did most of my work over 2 weekends. Now, there was planning ahead of time, but my choosing of the different sections of my video, my analysis of videos, my writing, proofing, all of that, 2 weekends. I mean, probably 40 hours worth of work total, including rereading standards, reading my entry directions, planning, actually videotaping in classrooms, those kinds of things. So you're not looking at near the time commitment. It's still rigorous. It's a very rigorous process, and you can't slack off and just put on whatever you want, but you're really not looking at quite as much of a time commitment. Is there a payment process? Initial payment of $300, then how long and how much? You'll have another $850 that you have to pay. The total fee is $1150, and unfortunately there's no financial assistance available for that. The state kind of feels like, you know, they've been paying us the supplement the whole way along, so they're not going to offer anything for renewal. And usually you have to have that all paid by January 31st. I think they gave renewal candidates till the end of this month to get money in. But if you're looking at a future window, so it'll be by January 31st. You would need to have that money in. I have been told that you can claim it on your taxes as an educational expense. So I'm not an accountant, but talk to somebody who actually understands tax law and ask them. I did claim it on mine. I was told that I could. Have not been audited yet. Knock on wood, making my dogs bark. But, you know, that's just something for you to check out. I had a sick child today, so I'm actually doing this from home. As a generalist, do you still have to address each subject? No, you're not having to worry about it like that. I was an early childhood generalist, And so my focus in terms of subjects was science, because that was an area of growth that I identified for myself as an initial candidate, and that continued. So I chose to use that as one of my PGEs. My pedagogy piece was that all children can learn. That's the brain-based stuff and the arts integration pieces. So no, you don't have to focus on all of them. You might just have one area that was a focus for you, or two, depending on what your situation was. I apologize. As I said, I had a sick child, and I didn't want to cancel the webinar, so I'm logging in from home, and my sick child keeps opening the office door. Okay, I'm going to make this the unofficial end to our webinar. I'll hang out for another couple minutes in case you have any other questions. Remember, I'm going to email the PowerPoint to you tomorrow. If you think of something later on, please feel free to email me, call me. I'll be glad to help you in any way that I can. If this recorded, I will also send the link to the recording. We have had a lot of trouble with it, and so I can't promise that it's recorded the way it's supposed to, but if it did, I will definitely send you the link for it. That's fine. Somebody's saying that they may have missed a couple things. So as long as it recorded, like I said, I'll be glad to send you that. I'm glad it was helpful. Thanks, Leanne. I'll see you Thursday. Okay. You all have a wonderful afternoon. Good luck to you as you go through this process. And remember to email me if you have any questions. I'll be glad to help you in any way I can. You're welcome.